Hello, good afternoon. So today is one last time on these pieces by Locke and Williams, and on Monday we move on to Parfit and Parfit's personal identity paper, and we'll spend the whole week on Parfit unless you complain. I want to begin by just going back over where we got to with the Williams thing last time. So there was this business about you're told that you're the prince and you're the person that's going to be tortured. And that sounds really terrible. You're told you're going to be driven mad and tortured. And that sounds awful. Meanwhile, the cobbler's going to be driven mad and then rewarded. And that sounds pretty bad, but not so bad. But it doesn't really help much. And then there's another way of describing the same situation, which is to say, you're going to swap bodies with the cobbler. You're going to move into the cobbler's body and then be rewarded. The cobbler's going to swap into your body and then be tortured. And that sounds not so bad at all if you're the prince. That was the idea. And Williams's thing was, it's the same situation. So the idea is, you can describe this situation at a high level. There's a high level of description where the facts about identity come in. And then you can describe it at a more basic level where you just say what is going on with the bodies, the brains, the traces, all that kind of stuff. If you just describe this situation in terms of what's going on with what body, what brain is where the memory traces are, then these two situations at that low level are exactly the same. If you take away the facts about identity, these two situations are just the same. Is that okay? Put your hand up if you're comfortable with that. If you're not comfortable, if you think there's a problem with the question, if you understand the question, keep your hand up if you understand the question. If you understand the question, okay. I can't say that's overwhelming. So if I just describe this in terms of which molecules are where, these two situations would be exactly the same. Yeah, yeah. A level of dissociation, in which one? This one or the other one? In the driven mad one? What's being dissociated from what? Yeah. I see. Being driven mad could take that form of having no idea who you are anymore, but I think the picture is that it could also take the form of having quite mistaken ideas about who you are. Yeah, I mean, if I think I'm Napoleon, then I get perfectly definite ideas about who I am, but I'm nonetheless crazy. Yeah, you see what I mean? So it's not really dissociation there. And the idea is this would be that kind of madness. Yeah. Anything else in this? Okay, so at the low level, these two situations are just the same. And then when you describe it in terms of identity, when you say, well, the one in the top left, that'll be you getting tortured. Or if you describe it by saying, the one in the top right, that'll have your memories. That just brings in facts about identity. That imposes facts about identity. And you can impose the facts about identity in two quite different ways in the same basic scenario. Yeah? That's the point about that example. And you might say, well, if I describe it in terms of memory, that doesn't really bring in identity. But remember, the thing about memory is, what's the definition of memory? We got this definition of memory that says, to remember a particular past event Well, you've got to have the impression that the past event occurred. Yeah, otherwise you wouldn't be said to remember it. Your impression that that event occurred must be caused in the right kind of way by the past event having occurred. And you had to have been there at the time. You can't remember something if you weren't there at the time. So the definition of memory just involves this thing about identity. Yeah? So when you say, well, you're going to be the same person at the top left as you are now, or if you're told your memories are going to move over there, that's another way of saying your identity is going to be shifted over to the top right-hand corner. And you can impose these different ways of thinking about identity on the very same basic scenario. Yep. So if you try and define identity in terms of memory, then you hit up the problem of circularity. Right? That was the thing about gorse and furs. It's just going round. And it's that third clause in the definition of memory, you had to have been there at the time, that makes the problem. So defining identity in terms of memory is really appealing, but actually when you think about it, it can't be done. Because memory presupposes identity. If someone says they remember the Battle of Waterloo, have any of you guys ever seen Total Recall? Yeah? Good. Okay, just one, right? Yeah, I've had its plot explained to me so often by students that I feel as if I have seen it myself. But I haven't, I've never, what with catching up with the Great Dead Russians and all that, I've never quite got around to watching Total Recall. But I looked up the plot on Wikipedia just to check that my impression of it is right. And it's something like this. There's a company that, if you can't afford to go to Mars, they will implant Mars memories in you so you can tell everyone about what a great vacation you had on Mars. So this regular guy, you tell me if I'm getting this right, this regular guy goes to the company to get some racy Mars memories implanted because he can't afford the vacation. He wants memories of him as a secret agent to be implanted. And when they try to do that, they discover that he actually is a secret agent with a veneer of false memories covering his real memories, if you see what I mean. Yeah? So the people at the company are naturally very put out by this and bundle him out. But he then does a deal with the company. Recall that he'll get his Mars memories suppressed. They'll put down his old memories, the memories of Mars and being a secret agent and all that. And as a kind of bonus package to compensate him for all the anguish he's been through, they'll give him a set of wish fulfillment false memories. And then they begin doing that, and at that point they discover a different and older set of suppressed memories, revealing that the unbelievable memories they're about to insert are already there and are true. Is that it? Is it something like that? Right. Yeah. I mean, the way I had it explained to me by students was, he's a regular guy. He's like you or me. He's just living an ordinary life. But then he, for reasons which were never really explained to me, discovers that his apparent memories of his past are all false. Yeah. And then, for reasons that are doubtless excellent, he has to go to Mars to check this out. So he goes to Mars. And part of the point of that is that if you discovered if you thought that was what was going on with you, going to Mars would be worth it. Right? You wouldn't say, well, let's just cover it up. Let's just go back to living my regular life. You'd want to know what was really going on. So you don't take your apparent memories as actually infallible guides to who you are. You assume there's a fact about who you are, and your memories might or might not match up to that. So which person you are must be something that's being defined independently of anything about your memories. Otherwise, you couldn't make sense of having a whole stack of different sets of memories, some of which are true and some of which are false. There must be a fact about which person you are independent of anything to do with the memories. So you can't define memory in terms of identity. So thinking about this situation as involving a body swap can't be right, because you need the body to say what the same as a person is. So you are going to be tortured. I don't think I put that very well, but that's the Williams. That's basically the Williams argument, though he doesn't have the stuff about total recall. Yep. Okay, so this is a puzzling situation. If this was one possible scenario, would you vote for this? You're going to be tortured, driven mad and tortured. Is that an agreeable scenario? Let me just check. Can you put your hand up if that is an agreeable scenario? Driven mad and tortured. Yes. No? Okay. Okay, we don't need a vote. Swap body and rewarded. What about that one? What's wrong with that? Right. But what's the problem with it? Why would you be like? Why would you want to swap body? Is that the question? Oh, how do you want to happen? Yeah. Let's suppose the alternative is you get tortured. Right? Yeah, let's suppose the alternative is you get tortured. Yep. You swap body and are tortured. Yeah. Yeah, okay. Just checking. Right. But that's just the same as this scenario, right? Yeah. That's the trap. Right. If you state the preferences in terms of identities, yeah, then it's easy. If you state the preferences in terms of what the underlying facts are, these are just the same scenario. So it must be irrational to be preferring one to the other. The objective facts are just the same. Sorry? I'm saying that you can be forced into a contradiction by consulting your natural preferences about these two scenarios. Okay. Let me try and put this in perspective. Actually, for this next bit, I need an assistant. So I want to think about the identity of a concrete object in general. There are lots of concrete objects, right? There are abstract objects like numbers and triangles and so on. But there are concrete objects like stars or tables or chairs or people. So the question about the identity of a person is a question about the identity of a particular kind of concrete object. And I think there's something very general you can say about the identity of a concrete object, whatever it is, which is that it's a causal notion. That for it to be the same concrete object later as it was earlier, there has to be a causal connection between the way it was earlier and the way it is later. The way it is earlier must be one of the causes of the way it is later. So, actually, let me take a simple demonstration. Would someone volunteer to help me with this? Yes, good. Please come to the front, sir. Okay, so okay, I have here a stool creator, right? Now, be careful. Don't point it at the audience, right? Right. You point that at an arbitrary place, right? And it makes a stool. Yeah? What kind of stool you can't predict in advance. It's kind of, what's the word I want? Stochastic in its working. Yep. So let's just make an X in this stool. Can you see the X? Look at that. Okay. And I have here, this is just a kind of app, a stool annihilator. You point this at a stool, press the button, and atoms composing the stool are spread to the four corners of the universe. Yep. Okay, so what we're going to do is you are going to point your stool annihilator here, and your stool creator here, and I am going to point my stool annihilator here. Okay? And right on my count, we're going to go. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Whoa! Did you see that? Did you see the flicker? Wow. It's really similar, isn't it? It looks just the same as the old one. You made one that was just the same as the old one. Okay, we should discuss this, but thank you. See, look at this. It's got an X on it. But is that because I used the chalk a couple of minutes ago? No, that is just a coincidence. I remember his stool creator is stochastic, right? It just randomly generates something. It just happened to make one that looks just like the old one. So the X is not there because of what I did earlier. In fact, the whole thing is not the way it is because of what I did earlier. The whole thing is the way it is because of what happened when he pushed the button. So bear with me in this, assuming that everything I've said to you is true. Is this the same stool as we had here 5 minutes ago? No, this is a different stool. It's just really similar to the old one. Yep. That's right. The beams didn't meet. I don't really have the physics to explain how this works, but yeah, the physics of it is very complicated. But roughly what happens is that his beam comes right here and randomly generates a stool. Yep. And my beam comes right to a quantum shot of his beam and annihilates the stool. Any stool that's there. You see what I mean? By the physics, yeah. Okay, I'm just checking. I mean, I'm happy to go further into the physics if you like. I did annihilate it. Look, if he hadn't done that, if he hadn't pushed his... Sorry? That's right, he creates one. Well, it's pretty much at the same time. For all practical purposes, it's at the same time. I mean, you might have seen a little bit of a flicker there. Yeah, it might be a little bit after. It might be a heartbeat after, yeah. No, it was just pure coincidence that there's an X on it. Yeah? I mean, that's what was so amazing about what just happened, right? It just happened that way, yeah. It could have been any kind of stool. Okay, you got the scenario? So is that one stool through there the whole time or a different stool? How many stools? 2, right? The old stool and the new stool. Okay, that's my point. That the reason is not the same stool is not that this one isn't like enough to the old stool. This one is really like the old stool, down to the X. The important thing is that the old stool wasn't the cause of the way the new stool is. When I leaned in and made a mark on the old stool, that mark was not persisting through to the new stool. Yeah? That mark the mark that's on there now was not because of my action on the old stool. You see what I mean? That's why it's not the same stool. So I say, that's the way it works in general for any concrete object. If it's the same object over time, then what happened? If it's the same object over time, then what happened? The actions on the object at an earlier time have to be the causes of the way the object is at a later time. That's true for animals, it's true for stars, it's true for galaxies. Any concrete object, the way it is earlier has to be a cause of the way it is later for it to be the same thing. Is that plain as day? Yeah. And now we can state the issue with personal identity very simply. So we did a practical demonstration of what makes it the same desk earlier as it was later. But the thing about people is that people are very complex objects. With a stool, it's only got a relatively simple set of properties. You and me are much more complicated than any stool. In particular, we have both physical properties and psychological properties. So that means that when you're looking at the way it is for us, earlier and later, you can look at two kinds of question. You can say, is the way this thing is physically at the earlier time a cause of the way this thing is physically at the later time? Or you can ask it at a psychological level. You can ask, is the way this thing is psychologically at the earlier time a cause of the way it is psychologically at the later time? Yeah. That has to be possible, yeah. But the way that causation gets transmitted across time will be that you, even if something physical happens to you, you have to have some perception of it for it to be affecting the way you are later. So the cause that you're thinking of there would be going back from an earlier perception to a later memory, something like that. Yep. And that's what memory is, really. I mean, here we've got the X. I reached in, carved the X in the thing, and ordinarily the stool retains that mark till later. In memory, what happens is that the world reaches in through your eyes, as it were, and carves an X on your brain. That's like the memory trace. And the reason it's there later is that it was there earlier. You see what I mean? So it's just that we have just the same structure of identity as the stool. It's just that being more complex, having both psychological properties and physical properties, we can say that, we can say either the later person is the same as the earlier person if the physical properties of the later person causally depend in the right kind of way on the physical properties of the earlier person. Or you could say the later person is the same as the earlier person if the psychological properties of the later person are causally dependent on the in the right kind of way on the psychological properties of the earlier person. That's why these puzzles come up, because there are these two different ways of thinking about the identity of the self, as fundamentally physical or as fundamentally psychological. And our general notion of identity, I mean, with a stool, it's not really possible for there to be two families of property that the stool has that could come apart. That's why you don't really have deep puzzles about, but is this the very same stool as I had yesterday? Nobody would agonize over that. But with people, you can imagine, these prince and cobbler cases, you can imagine the psychological structure coming apart from the physical structure. That's how this kind of puzzle can arise. I mean, if you think of memory as the basic way causal influence in your mind gets transmitted from earlier to later, then what you'd be saying is, we've just reached the memory criterion. I said you have this criterion of identity for the stool, that if the X here was caused by my making the mark earlier, then it's the same stool. Right? That's to say, applying that to the psychology of a person, that model to the psychology of a person, that just is the memory criterion of identity. That the X is the memory of my earlier action on the stool. Your memories are the impresses that the world made on you earlier and that have continued through time. Okay, so that's what's going on. That's why personal identity is so puzzling. It's just this basic point that people are complex. They have these two families of properties, the physical and the psychological. Once you have these two families of properties, you can generate these puzzles because their causal structures can come apart. Isn't that satisfying? That sorts out why it's been so puzzling so far. Are you comfortable with that? Yeah? It doesn't seem satisfying. Oh. Okay. It's the best I can do. We take ourselves to be unities, yeah. Yeah. Disassemble. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah, it's a really important fact about us, and it can't be, the way I'm putting it, it seems like you can say what you like about what's going on at the high level. Yeah, we know what the hard facts are. It's the facts down here. At the high level, you can describe it using physical continuity, physical causal connections as a basic criterion of identity, or you could describe it using psychological causal connections as a criterion of identity. It's up to you. Choose whichever one you want. Yeah. But that doesn't really answer the question, because if you're given this scenario where someone's going to be tortured, the question you naturally ask is, but will it be me? And if someone comes up with a big rigmarole like this about, well, there'll be these psychological causal connections and these physical causal connections, that's not really answering your question. You want to know, but is it going to be me? Yeah, I'm just playing that back to you. Yeah. So it's not satisfactory. Okay, that's a bit of a blow. Well, what Williams was suggesting was that if you think the memory criterion is circular, because I'm going to think of these later states as memories, then it's got to be me. Yeah, that's what the total recall kind of thing brings out. So you can't define it in terms of memory. Identity can't be defined in terms of memory, because memory presupposes identity. That's the circularity point. So if you put it like that, you could satisfy what Umra was saying there by saying, well, forget the memory stuff. The memory stuff is just a mistake. So that really would throw the prince and the cobbler example into the bin. You can't really change bodies. It makes no sense. The only conception of identity we have is a conception of physical states earlier causing physical states later. Okay, how about that? Is that satisfying? Nobody's satisfied. You don't look very satisfied. Yeah. Yes, good. Physical states change. Yep, sure. Yeah, that would be terrible if that was the upshot. But I'm not saying they have to be the same. I'm just saying the earlier physical states have to cause the later physical states. So if I'm making if you're in a car crash and the car was well designed, yeah, then the way the car crumples after the crash will depend on what shape exactly it was earlier. You see what I mean? So it's the car is obviously not the same shape as it was later as it was earlier. It's a different shape now. But it only is the shape it is later because it had the shape it had earlier. You see what I mean? When you walk away and say, thank you, Mercedes-Benz, or whatever you say, yeah. It will also depend, that's great, okay, it also depends on the other car that hit you, but there are these two factors, the way the car was earlier and what kind of impact there was on it. Yeah. So getting the X there, It depends partly on the way the surface is, whether the chalk takes at all, but also on what I'm doing to it. Yep. And we're all like that, right? As you go through life, you suffer a whole bunch of crashes and people impacting on you, and how well you make it depends on how well you're designed, if you see what I mean. How well you last. Yeah. So you're different after than you were before, but the way you were psychologically earlier is causing you to be the way you are psychologically later, even though you're not exactly the same. Yeah. I'm filling in a bit for Williams here, but that would be I think this would be the natural way to complete Williams's argument, to say, and you can't have a memory criterion because the memory criterion is circular. Yeah. Yes. That's right. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to suggest in a minute that that's not right, but for the moment, that's where we've got to. This is the point in the, what's the other one? Pilgrimage that we've got to. Yeah. Okay. So you see, what the structure is, there's this complexity in the notion of a person having two kinds of properties for us to look at causal connections between. That's what lets the Prince and the Cobbler case get generated. And then there's an argument for saying, forget the stuff about psychology here, because that depends on memory, and memory presupposes identity. So throw that one out. Plain as day? Okay. Plain as day. Well, why couldn't we do it in terms of memory? I think I imagine that for most people hearing that, you don't actually just say, so yeah, I guess I just am a body and brain. That's it. I just am a biological unity. You say, no, there's more to that. There's more to me than that. The psychological life is what really matters. Here we all are, philosophers, practically pure spirit. I mean, how can our identity be tied to the identity of a fleshly thing? So there must be surely a way of saving the idea that psychology over time is what's the great thing, rather than the identity of the body. And I think there is. Look, remember, this was the definition of memory, right? You have to have the impression that it happened. You having that impression is caused in the right kind of way by the fact that it happened, and you had to have been there, right? That was the definition, and I said, it's that last bit that makes the trouble, the clause that says, you had to have been there. So let's go back to the definition. These three clauses, you have to have the impression that the thing occurred, and you having that impression was caused in the right kind of way, and you were there at the time. Well, if the third clause is causing trouble and making it circular, then what shall we do with the third clause? Delete it. Right? Let's just miss out the third bit. Okay, that's not going to be memory because you didn't have to be there. But you can say, well, you quasi-remember it. You kind of remember it. If the first two conditions are met, if the thing happened and that caused in the right kind of way the formation of this impression of the thing having happened, that's a quasi-memory. Are all your regular memories quasi-memories? Are regular memories, let me put this another way, are regular memories quasi-memories? Put up your hand if the answer is yes. And if the answer is no? Okay, the correct answer is yes. But I'm happy to hear opposition. But look, for it to be a memory, it must meet these three conditions, right? For it to be a quasi-memory, it must meet these two conditions. Yep. These two are the same as the first two of this definition. Yes? So let me give this to you as a test. If something meets all three of these conditions, must it also meet these two conditions? Put up your hand if you think the answer is yes. And if you think the answer is no. Okay, right. Sorry? Okay. These two conditions, let me frame this. These two conditions are just the same as the first two conditions here. At least if I've written it out rightly, they are. Is it not? Oh dear. Yes, they are. They're just the same. Okay, take a minute on this. Are the first two there the same as the first two here? Okay? Look at that. So if something meets all three of those conditions, will it also meet those two conditions? Yes, it will also meet those two conditions, right? You had to meet those two conditions in order to meet those three conditions, right? So it meets up, yes? A member of both sets. That's right. Exactly, that's right. But that's what I asked you. Is every memory a quasi-memory? And I say the answer to that is yes. Every memory you have right now is also a quasi-memory. Okay? But are there quasi-memories that are not memories? Well, suppose you go on vacation. Suppose you see the Taj Mahal and you come back and you do the regular thing. You say, well, I've got here some pictures, but of course this doesn't really give you a sense of quite how big it is. Just fantastic. You had to have been there. While everyone kind of nods off. But suppose that it's the year 3000, and in the year 3000, instead of having holiday snaps, everyone has machined into their head pretty early in life a slot. And what you can do is, when you see some spectacular sight, you can take a brain slide of it. The memory trace is actually on a slide. And instead of saying it to you, of course, you really had to have been there, what I can do is I can take the slide with the memory trace out of my head and pop it in to the slot in your head. And then it's for you exactly as if you remember that evening, that beautiful evening long ago. Yeah? Now it's for you just as if you were the one with the memory. But do you remember it? Do you remember being at the Taj Mahal? Were you there? No, you were not there. Do you have to remember? Did you have to be there in order to be said to remember it? No. I mean, yes. Right. So you don't remember it. But it's just as if you remembered it. Right? You got a memory trace. You get the memory trace you have because that's the way it was. The world reached in and produced that memory trace. And that's now been passed to you. So you've got the impression of the Taj Mahal having been that way. You've got that impression that it was caused in the right kind of way because someone saw it. It just wasn't you. So if I've got the brain slide in your head, do you have a quasi-memory of the past scene when I drop that slide in? Put up your hand if the answer is yes. Yes, the answer is yes. Right. And if the answer is no? Okay. Okay, so that's a quasi-memory. Now, so far, quasi-memories are just advances on holiday slides. Right? It's just much better if I can give you a quasi-memory of what I saw and did in my holiday than if I just show you a picture. That's all we've got. But suppose that what happens is I drop in a slide of the Taj Mahal, and then I say, well, you should have seen what happened the next night. And I drop in another slide. And I keep going. Just the way people do with their holiday shots. Say, look at this one. Look at this one. And after a bit, I'm actually having to scoop out bits of your brain to make way for all the slides I'm putting in. Laughing maniacally I keep shoving in more and more brain slides. And after a bit, this isn't just boring. This is scary. Because what I'm doing is I am taking over your body and using it as a host. I've moved my entire self into your body. Right? I killed you. So there comes a point where if I've got one quasi-memory, if you got one quasi-memory of mine, that doesn't make you the same person. And if there's a quasi-memory here, just one quasi-memory here from the person back here, that doesn't make it the same person. And by the time I've finished dropping all my memory slides into your head, then clearly I've just taken you over. And there might be some intermediate points. If someone comes in halfway through and says, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" and stops the process, then we might not be quite sure who's in which body at that point, right? That may be just a little bit puzzling, what to say about that. But what we could say is something like, if the overwhelming majority of your quasi-memories causally derive from this earlier person, if the overwhelming majority of your quasi-memories causally derive from this earlier person, then you are that person. So that defines identity, not in terms of memory, but in terms of quasi-memory. So you can keep the idea that you're practically pure spirit, that your identity is not defined physically, and define it in terms not of memory, but of quasi-memory. In that way. I think we're reasonable. Okay, so we can see off that circularity objection. Yep. What if what, sorry? Two people, Yep. Yes. Does that make them the same person? Yeah, joined at the hip. Yeah. Okay, so here we got one. I mean, let me just draw them as oblongs, right? Here we got the other. So all they're getting all their perceptions together. Yeah. But when this one later has quasi-memories, they will causally derive from those perceptions, and the later quasi-memories here will causally derive from those perceptions. What you need to get them muddled up, if you see what I mean, you need to be getting some kind of crisscross here. Yeah. You might be able to do that. I wouldn't dispute you might be able to get that kind of case. But there are two things about it. One is, suppose you did get some kind of crisscross going here, then remember that there is that phrase, the right kind of way, in the definition of causation here. And it would be possible to argue, oh, that's not the right kind of way. I mean, but it's not really that well defined, that notion of the right kind of way. But the other thing is that if that did happen, if I was having my later memories because of what you'd seen, yeah, then if that really went on, if we had two people going about like that the whole time, you really might be puzzled. Are they two different people or are they one? Yeah. If you've got the mechanism set up so they work like that, I tell a secret to one of them, and later they don't remember. That person doesn't remember the secret at all. The other person does, right? And that happens on a kind of ongoing basis. And then you might not be quite sure which one you're talking to. You see what I mean? Right. I bet it doesn't happen very often, but okay. I mean, I'm not. I'm not saying that anything of the stuff I'm describing here happens very often, so that's fair enough. Okay, that's a good case. Yep. Yep. That's right. Yeah, you could have very similar memories, right? We both saw the Taj Mahal that same night, yeah? And in that sense, our memories are just the same. But we react to them very differently. You react with great nostalgia. I react by saying, God, I'm glad to be out of there. That thing was just overpowering, or whatever it was. Yeah. That's true. But they're not the same memories in the sense that your memories are tracing back to your perceptions. My memories are tracing back to my perceptions. Yeah. So there are different causal pathways for the two memories. Even though they're very similar, they're not one and the same. Yeah. So that's a bit different to the previous case where you really are getting crisscross across people. Yep, continue.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you could also describe the way that
Uh-huh.
when it seems like you describe the most common example, the Quasi memory. I think you describe it from saying,
That's right.
before I torture you, I'll give you all these new Quasi memories, and you'd still be terrified, right?
That's right.
Typically, you can look at something from the third person perspective and say, look, we're going to swap the Quasi memories. We're going to swap two of the two.
Yeah.
You want the prince's body to be tortured and the other body to be rewarded. So I'm wondering, it seems to me that the circularity of memory objection
Yeah.
to the Lockean picture and the William style objection to the Lockean picture is kind of independent. You can still run this thing, the William objection on the Campbell picture.
I think that is true. What you lose, what this stuff about quasi-memory brings out is the circularity objection isn't a killer objection to thinking of psychological causal connections as the key thing. Yeah. But Williams could come back and say, but I still think that physical causal connections are the important ones, not psychological causal connections. It seems to me he's on weaker ground there, because surely as philosophers we would all think the mind is the key thing. Maybe not.
Yeah, it seems to me that what was offered in the first or second personal description of this case,
Yeah.
when you say, look, I'm going to replace your memory before you
Yeah.
torture, isn't so much the sense that my body is going to be continuously developed. Have its memory replaced and that's going to be tortured. But it's rather like this first person perspective of an experiencing subject of the world. So it's not so much the memories that are replaced that are making me understand myself as
Yeah.
having done such and such in the past, but rather just that I will be continuously experiencing such and such time. And so that doesn't seem so much a physical separation.
It seems psychological, but would that be an argument for saying that it's the same person on the left all the way through? Because he would say, well, I'm experiencing continuously over time.
Right.
Yeah, so it would be consistent with the physical criterion that
Yeah.
this body is continuously experiencing psychological states. Yeah. Yeah. But if there's no causal continuity, it would be like, psychologically, it would be like the annihilator and creator here. Yeah. See, at the driven mad point, it's like when we do the zaps in the stool, in that there's this psychological discontinuity. Yeah. It's like you pointed a person creator and a person annihilator at this person's psychology. Yeah. So even if it was very similar, what you got after, I mean, in this case it might be, but yeah, the psychology you got after, then it still wouldn't be the same person. Would be the idea. Yeah. But you're perfectly right about the structure of the argument. Any last questions, comments? Okay, onwards. On Monday we'll do perfect. Thanks.